Blood is thicker than water, they say. But in my family, blood was just the ink my parents used to write blank checks for my brother. For 28 years, I was the invisible daughter, until the day the golden boy finally broke them, and suddenly, I was their only lifeline. My name is Sarah Gallagher, and for as long as I can remember, I have been a spectator in the theatre of my brother's life. Tristan was 2 years older, born with my mother's striking hazel eyes, my father's natural charisma, and an unspoken family decree that the sun rose and set on his shoulders. I grew up in an affluent suburb in Illinois, in a sprawling colonial house where the walls were plastered with framed photographs of Tristan holding the state championship baseball trophy. Tristan at his 8th grade graduation, grinning like he owned the world. Tristan at prom. If you looked closely at the background of a few of those photos, you might spot me, a quiet, brown-haired girl reading a book in the corner, blending into the wallpaper. I was what psychologists call a glass child. My parents looked right through me to focus on him. The favoritism wasn't even subtle. It was a structural pillar of the Gallagher household. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, didn't hate me. They just simply didn't have the emotional or financial bandwidth left after catering to Tristan's every whim. The first time it truly shattered my reality was the spring of my senior year of high school. I had spent 4 years grinding academically, taking every AP class our school offered, volunteering at the local animal shelter, and sacrificing a social life. My goal was singular: Georgetown University. When the acceptance letter arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope, I cried on the porch. I ran into the kitchen, clutching the letter like a winning lottery ticket. My mother was at the stove. My father was pacing, his phone pressed to his ear, his face pale. I didn't even get to speak. "Richard, what did the lawyer say?" My mother whispered frantically. Tristan, who had been away at his sophomore year of college, a private, wildly expensive liberal arts school he parted his way into, had gotten his second DUI in 6 months, but this time he had crashed his car into a storefront. The damages were astronomical. The legal fees to keep him out of jail were even worse. I stood there with my Georgetown letter. When my father hung up, I quietly pushed the envelope across the island. "I got in," I murmured. My father looked at the letter, then looked at me. His eyes were hollow. "Sarah, sweetie, I'm proud of you. I really am, but we need to talk about the college fund." Over the next hour, they explained that Tristan's legal mess was going to wipe out everything. Not just his half of the savings, but mine too. "We have to protect his future, Sarah," my mother pleaded, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "A criminal record will ruin him. You're so smart. You're a survivor. You can go to the state university. You'll thrive anywhere. Tristan needs us right now." I didn't argue. I had learned long ago that arguing against Tristan was like arguing against gravity. You just end up exhausted and grounded. So Tristan got a high-powered defense attorney, a slap on the wrist, and a brand new leased car, so he could get to his court-mandated counseling. I went to the local state college, took out $30,000 in student loans, and worked 30 hours a week, waiting tables at a diner off the highway to pay for my textbooks. The years that followed cemented our roles. I was the reliable, self-sufficient ghost. Tristan was the brilliant, misunderstood star who just needed a little help finding his footing. When Tristan married a high-maintenance socialite named Chloe, my parents took out a second mortgage to pay for the lavish country club wedding. When I married my husband, Liam, a kind, grounded software engineer who saw me for who I really was, We paid for our own modest backyard ceremony. My parents showed up an hour late because Tristan's flight had been delayed and they had insisted on picking him up from the airport themselves. I thought I had made peace with it. Liam and I built a beautiful, quiet life. I started my own accounting firm, meticulously building a roster of local small business clients. I was proud of my success. I bought my own home, paid off my student loans, and carefully built a wall between myself and the Gallagher family circus. I kept my distance, showing up for Thanksgiving and Christmas, smiling politely while Tristan bragged about his latest startup venture, usually something involving crypto or luxury imports that required constant infusions of our parents' cash. I thought I had successfully insulated myself from the blast zone of my brother's life. I was wrong. I was 32 when the illusion my parents had so desperately maintained finally went up in flames. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November. I was in the middle of a quarterly tax review with a client when my cell phone rang. Seeing my mother's caller ID, I normally would have sent it to voicemail. Our conversations were usually just her complaining about Chloe or asking if I knew any good tax loopholes for Tristan's latest failing business. But she called 3 times in a row. "Mum," I answered, stepping out of my office. "Sarah," she gasped, her voice trembling so violently I could barely make out the words. "It's your father. He's in the ER at St. Jude's. You need to come right now." My heart dropped. Despite everything, they were my parents. I cancelled the rest of my day, called Liam in a panic, and drove 40 minutes to the hospital, breaking every speed limit. When I burst into the waiting room, I found my mother pacing, clutching a crumpled tissue. She looked 10 years older than the last time I had seen her. "Is it a heart attack?" I asked, grabbing her shoulders. "Where is he?" "He's stable," she sobbed, collapsing into my arms. It was a mild myocardial infarction. Stress-induced, the doctors said. "Oh, Sarah, it's all gone. Everything is gone." I guided her to a vinyl chair, my accounting brain immediately latching onto her words. "What do you mean, everything is gone?" "Mum, what happened?" Over the next agonizing hour, between bouts of tears and defensive justifications, the ugly truth poured out. Tristan's latest business venture, a boutique logistics company called Apex, hadn't just failed. It had been a massive, fraudulent disaster. Tristan had taken out massive business loans, but because his credit was destroyed, he needed a guarantor. Unbeknownst to me, my father had co-signed on everything. But that wasn't the worst part. When the loans weren't enough to cover Tristan's spiraling lifestyle and his desperate attempts to keep the business afloat, Tristan had taken matters into his own hands. He had forged my father's signature to take out a massive line of credit against my parents' fully paid-off home. "Forged," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Mum, that's a felony. How much?" She wouldn't look at me. She stared at the linoleum floor. $400,000, Sarah. The room spun. "And the bank is calling the debt?" She nodded slowly. "The business collapsed 3 months ago. Tristan hasn't made a payment since. The bank sent the final notice of foreclosure today. When your father opened the mail and saw we were going to lose the house, he clutched his chest and collapsed. Anger, hot and blinding, flared in my chest. "Where is Tristan?" I demanded, looking around the empty waiting room. "His father is in the hospital because of him. Where is he?" "He's at home," my mother whispered, wringing her hands. Chloe was too distraught. He had to stay with her. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Chloe is distraught? Mum, Tristan stole $500,000 from you. He committed fraud." "Keep your voice down," she hissed, suddenly looking terrified. "You can't use that word. If the bank finds out he forged the signature, he'll go to prison, Sarah. Do you understand? Your brother would be ruined." I stared at her, utterly horrified. Even now, even with my father lying in a hospital bed with wires strapped to his chest, even with their home on the brink of being auctioned off, her primary concern was protecting her golden boy. "So what are you going to do?" I asked coldly. "Because you have 30 days before the bank takes the house." My mother finally looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but there was a desperate, calculating glint in them that chilled me to the bone. "We need your help, Sarah," she said, her voice dropping to a low, urgent whisper. "You and Liam are doing so well. You own your firm. You have that beautiful house. You have savings." I froze. No, absolutely not. "Sarah, please, just to cover the arrears. It's only $80,000 to stop the foreclosure and buy us some time to figure out a payment plan. It's a loan. We will pay you back." "With what money, Mom?" I snapped, no longer caring who heard me. "You're broke, and Tristan is a criminal. You need to report the fraud to the bank. It will clear your debt, save your house, and put the blame exactly where it belongs, on him." "I am not sending my son to prison," she shrieked, standing up. "He made a mistake. He was just trying to provide for his family. How can you be so cold? He is your blood." "And what am I?" I shot back, tears finally stinging my eyes. "What have I ever been to you? You took my college fund for him. You ignored my wedding for him. And now you want me to empty my life savings, money Liam and I have worked out of our minds for, to save him from the consequences of his own crimes?" My father's cardiologist stepped into the waiting room, interrupting us. He told us my father was awake and asking for us. I walked into that hospital room with my heart pounding. My father looked small, frail, and defeated against the stark white sheets. He looked at my mother, then at me. "Sarah," he rasped, reaching a trembling hand out toward me. I took it, my heart breaking despite my rage. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I know, Dad. Just rest. We'll figure it out." He squeezed my hand. "Your mother told you?" "I told her, Richard," my mother interjected quickly, stepping to the other side of the bed. "I told her about the loan. She's going to help us. She's going to front the money to stop the bank." I dropped my father's hand as if it had burned me. I looked at him, waiting for him to correct her. Waiting for him to finally, for once in his life, stand up and say that it wasn't my responsibility to fall on my sword for Tristan. My father looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Just until we can sell some things, Sarah. Please. I can't let my boy go to jail." In that sterile hospital room, smelling of bleach and regret, the last string tethering me to my family snapped. I left the hospital, feeling as though the sterile, iodine-scented air had crystallized in my lungs. The drive home was a blur of slick, rain-soaked Illinois highways and blinding headlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my modest sedan so tightly that my knuckles ached. For 28 years, I had believed that my parents' obsession with Tristan was simply a blind spot, a tragic flaw in their otherwise decent character. But as I merged onto the interstate, the horrifying truth settled over me like a suffocating blanket. They weren't just blind to his faults. They were active, willing accomplices in my emotional and financial destruction. They were perfectly happy to throw me onto the tracks to stop the train from hitting their precious son. When I finally pulled into the driveway of the home Liam and I had painstakingly saved for, the porch light was a beacon in the dark. Liam was waiting in the kitchen. He took one look at my pale, tear-streaked face, turned off the stove where he had been simmering soup, and pulled me into a fierce embrace. For 20 minutes, I sat at our kitchen island, gripping a mug of tea to stop my hands from shaking, and poured out the entire sickening story. I told him about the failed logistics business, the forged signatures, the $400,000 theft, the impending foreclosure, and my mother's grotesque demand that we empty our savings to cover the arrears. Liam, who had grown up with a financially abusive father and had fought tooth and nail for our stability, listened with a tightening jaw. When I finished, the silence in the kitchen was profound, heavy with the weight of the decision hovering between us. "Sarah," Liam said, his voice low and steady, carrying a quiet steel that I loved him for. "We are not doing this. We are not setting ourselves on fire to keep them warm. He didn't just drown. He drilled a hole in the boat, handed your parents the bucket, and now they want our life jackets. The answer is absolutely, unequivocally no." "I know," I whispered, staring down at the swirling amber liquid in my mug. "But Liam, they're going to lose the house. My dad is in the hospital. The guilt is eating me alive." "They chose this," he reminded me gently, placing his hand over mine. "Every time they bailed him out, every time they looked the other way, they were laying the bricks for this exact moment. You cannot fix a foundation that is fundamentally rotten." My accounting brain, the side of me that sought order in chaos, suddenly flared to life. If Tristan was desperate enough to commit a felony against our parents, how far had his desperation truly reached? A cold, creeping paranoia settled into my stomach. I opened my laptop, pulled up my premium credit monitoring service, and ran a comprehensive check on my own social security number. What I saw on the screen made the blood drain entirely from my face. 2 months ago, right around the time Apex Logistics was quietly collapsing, there were 3 hard inquiries on my credit report. 2 were for massive personal loans, and 1 was for a high-limit corporate credit card. They had all been denied, not because my credit was bad, but because 5 years ago, after Tristan had casually borrowed my debit card to pay for a ski trip, I had placed a permanent security freeze on my credit files. "Liam," I choked out, turning the laptop around. He tried to steal my identity too. If I hadn't frozen my credit, he would have drained us too. The remaining shred of guilt I felt toward my parents evaporated, replaced by a searing, white-hot fury. The next morning, at exactly 9 a.m., I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice dripping with an artificial, sickeningly sweet hope. "Sarah, sweetheart, did you talk to the bank? Were you able to transfer the funds?" "Mum, listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice as cold and flat as a frozen lake. "I am not giving you a single dime. Not now, not ever." There was a stunned silence on the line, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Sarah, you can't be serious. Your father is in a hospital bed. The bank is going to take our home." "Then you will have to find an apartment," I replied, refusing to let my voice waver. "I checked my credit report last night, Mum. Tristan tried to take out loans in my name 2 months ago. He tried to ruin Liam and me too. He is a criminal, and you are enabling him." "How dare you!" she shrieked, the sweet facade vanishing instantly, replaced by the vicious, defensive mother bear who had terrorized my childhood. "You are selfish. You have always been jealous of your brother. You sit in your perfect little house with your perfect little husband and look down on us. We are your family." "You made your choice a long time ago, Evelyn," I said, using her first name for the first time in my life. "You chose him. Now you get to survive him." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. The fallout was instantaneous. By noon, the flying monkeys had been deployed. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister, left a blistering voicemail accusing me of elder abuse. My Uncle Robert sent a long, guilt-tripping text about how family sticks together through mistakes. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply took a screenshot of my credit report showing Tristan's fraudulent inquiries, attached a brief explanation of the $400,000 forgery he committed against my parents, and sent it in a mass text to the extended family. Tristan committed multiple felonies. He stole $500,000 from my parents and tried to steal from me. If anyone feels compelled to bail out a 34-year-old fraudster, his GoFundMe is wide open. Do not contact me about this again. The silence from the extended family was immediate and deafening. The truth is a powerful disinfectant, and no one wanted their own bank accounts anywhere near Tristan's blast radius. But Tristan, emboldened by a lifetime of zero consequences, wasn't done. 3 days later, I was sitting in my office in downtown Naperville, reviewing a client's quarterly tax estimates, when the front door chimed. I looked up through the glass partition and felt a surge of adrenaline. Tristan was standing in my reception area. He looked rough. The usually immaculate golden boy had dark circles under his eyes, and his designer Tom Ford jacket looked rumpled, as if he had slept in it. But he still carried that arrogant, entitled swagger as he pushed past my receptionist and walked directly into my private office, shutting the door behind him. "Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter," he sneered, dropping into the chair opposite my desk, causing quite a stir in the family group chat, aren't we? "Get out of my office, Tristan," I said, my hand hovering over the desk phone. He leaned forward, dropping the swagger, his eyes suddenly desperate. "Sarah, come on. You have to help them. Dad is sick. The bank is breathing down my neck. You have the cash. I know your firm is pulling in mid-six figures. Just loan me the 80 grand to get the bank off my back. I'll pay you back with interest. I have a new angel investor lined up. I just need time." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see the terrifying, untouchable older brother who dictated my family's emotional weather. I just saw a pathetic, desperate con man. "There is no angel investor, Tristan," I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. "You ran a Ponzi scheme. You used new capital to pay off old debts to maintain Chloe's country club lifestyle until the music stopped. And when it stopped, you forged Dad's signature to steal the equity in their house. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to steal my identity." His face flushed a dark, ugly red. "I was going to pay it all back. It was a bridge loan. You're just a glorified bookkeeper, Sarah. You don't understand high-level business mechanics." "I understand wire fraud," I countered smoothly. "I understand identity theft. And I understand that if you don't leave my office in exactly 10 seconds, I am calling the police and handing them the IP address logs from your loan applications using my social security number." He stood up so fast his chair tipped over, crashing into the bookshelf. He slammed his hands onto my desk, his face inches from mine, spit flying from his lips. "You vicious, selfish little bitch! You've always hated me. You've always wanted to see me fail." "I never had to want it, Tristan," I whispered, holding his gaze without blinking. "You did it all by yourself." He stared at me, searching for the cowering, quiet sister he had dominated for decades. He didn't find her. With a disgusted scoff, he turned and stormed out of the office, slamming the glass door so hard it rattled in its frame. I sat alone in the quiet of my office, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the phone and dialed Greg Sterling, a law school buddy of Liam's who specialized in financial fraud. It was time to build a fortress, because the house of cards wasn't just falling, it was about to catch fire. The 30-day deadline imposed by the bank came and went with brutal indifference. My parents, paralyzed by denial and completely out of cash, did nothing. They simply waited for a miracle I refused to provide. When the foreclosure triggered, the bank didn't just seize the property. Because the $500,000 loan was severely delinquent mere months after origination, the bank's internal fraud department flagged the file. The unraveling happened with breathtaking speed. It started with a visit from Detective Gregory Hayes of the County Financial Crimes Unit. He didn't go to my parents first. He came to me. My attorney had preemptively submitted the evidence of Tristan's attempted identity theft against me. "Your brother left a remarkably sloppy digital footprint," Detective Hayes told me in my conference room. "But the real issue is the home equity loan. We suspect the notary who stamped the documents is complicit." Tristan hadn't just forged my father's signature in a vacuum. He had enlisted a college fraternity brother, Jason Higgins, who possessed a valid notary public commission. Facing federal conspiracy charges, Jason flipped in less than an hour. To save his own skin, he handed over a damning email thread where Tristan explicitly laid out the plan, admitted his father would never agree, and offered Jason $10,000 from the loan proceeds to falsify the stamp. The police didn't quietly ask Tristan to turn himself in. They arrested him on a Tuesday afternoon at the Oak Ridge Country Club. He was handcuffed in front of the club's board of directors, marched past the 18th hole, and stuffed into a squad cruiser. Chloe wasted no time. Before he had even posted bail, she filed for divorce, drained their joint checking account, and moved back to her parents' estate in Lake Forest. She left Tristan entirely alone to face the wreckage. But the most infuriating part was my parents' reaction. Even with Tristan facing serious prison time, my father went to the police station and tried to claim he had signed the documents, that his memory was just fuzzy. The detective essentially told him to go home before they charged him with filing a false police report. They were willing to sacrifice their remaining freedom for a son who viewed them as a human ATM. Tristan's defense attorney, paid for by my parents liquidating my father's meager remaining 401k, negotiated a plea deal. Tristan pled guilty to felony wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. The judge wasn't lenient. Tristan was sentenced to 4 years in a federal minimum security prison and ordered to pay restitution he would never realistically afford. My parents lost the colonial house in the suburbs. Moving day was a bleak Friday in March. They secured a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a deteriorating complex on the other side of the county, selling everything just to afford the deposit. I didn't help them pack. But on their first night, I drove over. When my mother opened the door, the sight of her nearly broke me. She looked incredibly fragile, her haughty arrogance entirely gone. My father sat in a faded recliner, staring blankly at a television that wasn't turned on. I placed groceries and a blister pack of my father's expensive heart medication on the counter. I had arranged with the pharmacy to pay directly, ensuring my father wouldn't die, while guaranteeing not a single penny could be funneled to Tristan's commissary account. My mother slowly looked up at me. Tears began to spill over her cheeks. "He called us today," she whispered, her voice cracking. "From the prison. He blamed us. He said if we had just given him the money for the lawyer from the beginning, he wouldn't be in there. He told us not to come visit him." She sank into a cheap kitchen chair, sobbing. "We gave him everything, Sarah. And he hates us." I stood in that depressing kitchen, waiting to feel the triumph of being right. But I felt nothing but profound sadness. There was no victory here. I placed a tentative hand on her shoulder. "I'll pay for the medication, Mom," I said softly, "and I'll make sure you have groceries delivered. But that is the extent of it. You cannot ask me for cash. If you violate that rule, I will walk out that door, and you will never see me again. Do you understand?" She nodded, completely defeated. "I understand. I'm so sorry, Sarah." I left the apartment an hour later, driving back to the life I had built with my own 2 hands, a life that was solid, secure, and entirely mine. Blood may be thicker than water, but it can still drown you if you refuse to swim away. I loved my parents deeply, but I had to love myself enough to let them face the harsh reality they built. Tristan was their golden child. Ultimately, that false gold dragged them under. I survived because I finally stopped trying to save people who only ever wanted to sacrifice me for him.